In this session, we're going to review some of the basics of what Torah Shebaal Peh is in order to understand what a Mishnah is. And the more we understand what a Mishnah is, the better equipped we will be to be able to understand how the Mishnah works and its style and so on. So we begin from the beginning. When Bnei Israel left Mitzrayim, they came to a place called Har Sinai, and that's where they received the Torah. The truth is that this Torah has two parts to it. One part is called the Torah Shebechtav, that is what's written, the written Torah, which we usually call the Chumash. And the other part is the Torah Shebaal Peh, which is the oral law. It's called oral because it was given to us in a way that was not written. Instead, Moshe taught it to the Bnei Israel, to the Zakanim, and they taught it to their children to their children, all down the generations, and they were not supposed to write down this Torah Shebaal Peh. Now, this Torah Shebaal Peh is very important to the Torah Shebechtav, because without the Torah Shebaal Peh, which are the details and explanations of the mitzvos, we would not be able to do any one mitzvah in the Torah. For example, the Torah tells us that ukshartam leos al yadecha vehayu letotafos bein einecha. You should put on a tefillin on your hand and tefillin on your head. It should be a sign. But the Torah does not give us the details of what exactly is the sign, what size, what shape, what material, what's written in it, nothing. All this is found in Torah Shebaal Peh. So without this information from the Torah Shebaal Peh, we would not be able to do the mitzvah of tefillin. The same thing is true of mezuzah. The Torah tells us, Uchsaftam al mezuzos beisecha visharecha. You should write these words on the doorpost of your house, but it doesn't clearly say which words and how to write it and where exactly to place it. So again, without the Torah Shebaal Peh, we would not be able to do the mitzvah of mezuzah. And this is true of every single mitzvah in the Torah. There's no one mitzvah in the Torah that has enough details and explanations in the Chumash to be able to do the mitzvah unless we look at the Torah Shebaal Peh. The Torah Shebaal Peh is this supplement, this information that enables us to fulfill the mitzvahs of the Torah. Now, the Torah Shebaal Peh was studied and memorized down the generations from teacher to student, from father to son, until the time of the Romans. Again, the Torah's intention was that this Torah should be kept orally, as we see in this psukim. Eile achukim ve'amishpatim ve'atoros asher nasan Hashem beino ubein bnei Israel behar Sinai biyad Moshe. Note that it says these are the chukim, the laws, ve'amishpatim, and the statutes, the ordinances, ve'atoros, in plural, the toros that Hashem placed between himself and Bnei Israel in Har Sinai biyad Moshe, through the hands of Moshe. So the pasuk indicates that there was not a Torah, but Toros. This alludes to the existence of two parts to the Torah. Not only that, but this pasuk in Shmo says, "Vayomer Hashem el Moshe." Hashem said to Moshe, "Ksov lechayis adevarim ha'ele." Write these things. That's the Chumash. Ki al pi adevarim ha'ele, because through these words, Karasi itcha bris ve'ez bnei Israel, that he has established a bris, a covenant with Bnei Israel. Notice that it says al pi adevarim. Al pi is oral. So the whole idea of Torah Shebaal Peh is indicated by these two psukim, that there's a Toros, and one of these Toros is al pi adevarim. It has to be kept orally. And this is how it continued. It was not supposed to be written down, except that it came the time of the Romans. We know the Romans invaded Eretz Israel. They persecuted the Jews. Eventually, they destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, and they forbade the Jews to keep mitzvos. They killed Jews if they found them studying Torah. So the Chachamim were worried that if they don't write down the Torah Shebaal Peh, it will be lost from Klal Israel. So therefore, they realized that we have to write the Torah Shebaal Peh. But they also understood that we're not supposed to write it down. So therefore, when they wrote down, they only wrote those things that were likely to be forgotten. Meaning, those parts of Torah Shebaal Peh that everybody knew, that were well known, there was no worry, there was no need to write it down. So not everything became written down because, again, we're not supposed to write down. So in a time of crisis, we got to do the minimum. We don't just do everything that we're not supposed to do. So therefore, this Torah Sheba'al Peh that was written down, it was very brief, and it was written with the minimum explanations necessary. And this is what became known as the Mishnah. The word Mishnah means a teaching. The way it was done is Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, who was the head of the Bnei Israel at that time after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. He gathered hundreds and hundreds of the Chachamim, and they wrote down the Torah Sheba'al Peh that they had received from their teachers, and he organized it, and he determined what was needed to be written and what was not. So it was not written just by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He was really like the editor. He's the one who organized it. And they were careful not to write too much. They only wrote the minimum, that which they had to write. Now this is important to know, because then when we look at a Mishnah, we have to understand that a Mishnah is written in the shortest possible way, but there's a lot of information there. So we have to look at the Mishnah carefully with the understanding that there's a lot of information that is compressed, that is packed into these brief words. And also we're going to be able to understand why later on, after the Mishnah was completed, when the level of knowledge was decreasing, was becoming less and less because the Roman persecutions continued, so there was a need to write down more explanations. Well, now we know why there's a need, because the Mishnah was not written with all the information, with all the details. They only wrote the minimum. So therefore later on they had to write more, and this is what became known as the Gemara. So now the Mishnah was written in Lashon Kodesh, it was written in Hebrew, and when the Mishnah was completed, it was the Chasim Asa Mishnah, was sealed so that nobody can change it, nobody can disagree with it. And we know that the Mishnah was divided into Shisha Sidra Mishnah. There are six sections to the Mishnah, and the Mishnah has different parts to it. Every Mishnah has a case, the situation that it's talking about, and it also has the din. It tells you the halacha, it tells you what a law applies to that case. Now, sometimes a Mishnah mentions also the name of the Rav, the Tana who wrote it, the Rabbi who wrote it. Sometimes the Mishnah also gives you the reason. But every single Mishnah has at least two parts. That is the case. It also has a din. Now, let's look at the beginning of this page of Gemara, which is Eilu Metzios. If you look in the top of the page, it says this is Perek Rishon, and it's part of Bava Metzia. This is the name of the Meseches. The entire book is called Bava Metzia, and the name of the Perek Rishon is called Shnai Mochazin. This is the text of the Gemara here. This is the end of the Perek, and now begins a new Perek. This is the second Perek, and this Perek is called Eilu Metzios, which is going to talk about objects that you find, lost and found, the laws that applies to them. So in the middle of the page, we have the Gemara and the Mishnah. On this side, we see the words of Rashi. And here's another commentary called the Tosfos. The Mishnah starts with Eilu Metzios, and it ends here where it says Gimel Mem, that's short for Gemara. That's already where the Gemara is going to explain the words of the Mishnah. Not every page of Gemara has a Mishnah in it. Sometimes there's several pages of Gemara that explain the Mishnah.